Hi, I'm Jeff Bermudez.
And I'm Omar Kadri.
Welcome to the Collective Journey.
Join us as we explore some of the most promising talents, thought leaders, and change influencers in our city and beyond.
As we uncover these hidden gems, I hope you'll find that they're people just like you and I, with hopes and dreams and gifts that they would like to show to the world.
It is our mission to share their work, to share their story, and to appreciate what our community is capable of producing.
This is my adventure.
This is your adventure.
This is our Collective Journey. This week on the Collective Journey, we take on the concept of change. Change is said to be the only constant in life. Plans change, people change, and so does the world that we live in. Our guest has taken an interest in our planet's ever-changing climate. Having lived and traveled across several different countries, Sara is herself no stranger to change. She is one of the founders of a Montreal-based group focused on providing climate change literacy. With knowledge that she has acquired both through life experience and education, she hopes to spread her message of caring for the environment. Once again, this is our collective journey, and today, this is Sara Ferwati.
I was born in London, Ontario. My dad was doing his PhD here at Western. And soon after I was born, my family went to Syria. I'm Syrian, or my parents are. And I lived there till the age of 6. And then we moved to Saudi Arabia. And then at the age of 10, I came back to London. My family officially immigrated to Canada at that time. And lived here for 4 years till grade 8. And then we went to Oman. That's Oman. Next to the Emirates, next to Dubai. And I did my high school there. And then came back to Western, back to London, Ontario, and did my undergrad here. And traveled after, and then went to Montreal.
It's kind of a full circle story right there.
Yeah, that's quite a lot of experience for such a young person.
Yeah, born in London and back again.
Born in London, back again.
Yeah. With all the moving, how would you say that's shaped your personality and worldview?
I think. Do you know when people make 5-10 year plans?
Yeah.
I think people's life models are very much shaped by what they've had in their childhood or what values their parents or the environment that they grew up in prioritized. And so the environment I grew up in was constantly changing. I never had one family home for a very long time. I always made new friends every time I moved. So the way that changed me was, this sounds kind of corny, but the world is the limit. Like, I don't see myself having a job in southwestern Ontario. To me, my job opportunities could be anywhere. I could be living in the next 5 years, literally anywhere. It's I don't have a concept of. I also don't have a concept of home where a specific space that I would call home for a long time, or I still consider maybe Damascus or my grandmother's house. That's like a constant theme in my life, or a constant object in my life. I would call that space home. But anywhere new can be called home. And also, I think your relationships with people, you realize that there's so many wonderful people out there everywhere in the world. I've been very fortunate to have had the opportunities to travel, made friends in all over. I'm traveling to Paris and I'm staying with a friend there, and then I'm going to India and I'm staying with a friend there. So it's, I've been very fortunate to have had friends everywhere. But the moral of that is that you could create a community and you could create connections anywhere you go, and that's something I value.
Okay, so it seems like you're big on mobility. Like that's very valuable to you.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
The idea. Well, it's not that it's just that my mind isn't constrained to one space. Like I can't say that in my dreams or in my 10-year plan, I don't have to buy a home in a certain city or to have a job in a certain city. I'm not tied to anything yet.
You touched upon your relationships with people.
Yeah.
Because you're moving everywhere and always making new friends, you have to compress kind of the relationship that you have.
Yeah.
Like, let's say you grew up and lived in one town your whole life.
Yeah.
It's kind of a slow burn. You get to know the person, and
Right.
then a few months down the line, you get further along. But if you have that mindset where I could be anywhere in the next year or two,
Yeah.
you kind of don't take it for granted, and it kind of accelerates.
That's absolutely right. That's
Yeah.
you hit the nail on the head in the sense that you're forced to create deeper connections at a faster rate, and the key to that is just being more vulnerable with people, and because you move a lot and you make friends in different spaces, or I have, I've been forced. I'm very much comfortable, as you said, creating those deep connections because I think the key to becoming or connecting with people is exposing your vulnerabilities.
Okay. How so? Like, if you can give a few examples, I guess.
I think it's related to our psychology as people, the idea that people will feel safe around those who they relate to. So it's both exposing your vulnerabilities and truly taking an interest in someone's life and who someone is, and listening to them and asking them because you're curious, not because you're waiting to provide or showcase yourself to them. And that's because, if you're forced to, or if you're in a position where you have to make friends, you're curious about someone, you want to know about who they are and learn about them. So that's one aspect of it. And the vulnerability comes in sharing. You can't share superficial information if you want to create those connections. It has to be, it's evolutionary. You provide something that's vulnerable, someone else provides something that is also equivalently a vulnerable piece of information, and that's how you slowly build trust and connections with people.
Well, it's nice that like you're saying that you're somebody who's always moving from place to place and going through all sorts of different people. It's nice to expose yourself to them in a way that makes the relationship last, because the chances are that you're probably not going to be exposed to that person for a long time or ever again, right?
That's it.
I mean, like you were telling me earlier that you were in Oman. Do you ever see yourself going back there? And if you go back there, are you going to be able to expose yourself to every single person that you met?
Right. I do see myself visiting. I don't know if I see myself living in Oman for the long term. To be fair, I don't see myself living in any one place for a very long time. But I'm open to living in Oman. I'm open to visiting. I'm still in touch with a lot of my high school friends in Oman. I ran into someone in Montreal who I went to high school with, and he was like, "Oh my God, Sarah!" I was like, "Hey, we went to high school together," and we started grabbing coffee. I'm planning a trip with a friend who's in Oman. So it's trying to maintain those connections and there's a lot that goes into maintaining those connections, a lot of different aspects. But I don't close any doors.
That's good. It takes a lot of energy to do that. I'm sure it's not like an easy task, but it's probably very fulfilling, I imagine.
I think it's a two-door way. The idea that, you're not expected to talk to someone every single day. That's not feasible. But when you talk to someone, you every now and then, once or twice a year, you take a genuine interest in who they are and what's happening in their lives, and you ask about them, and that's how you could maintain connections. But the other person everyone has different needs with what's required in maintaining friendships or relationships. Some people need to be connected every day, and to them that's what constitutes a friendship, and others need to be connected less so, or they understand the burdens of life.
So your philosophy towards fostering relationships, in developing that, has it been more of an organic development?
So it's not like I started moving when I was a kid, and then suddenly I was like, oh, I'm really good at making friends. When
Yeah.
you're a child and you move a lot, when I moved to Canada, I didn't speak any English, so I was bullied. You develop defense strategies, you know, the idea that you're always the new kid, and that's not very easy. So you become a bit defensive, maybe a bit angry. And so I think going into university, I wasn't very friendly, I don't think. I was in high school described as intimidating or unapproachable, and I had to think about that and why I was labeled that way. And in university, those labels and those traits followed me, and I had to think about what makes someone sociable, or why am I the way I am? And a lot of it is the fact that we're so focused on, in a social interaction, we're so focused on us, on how others perceive us. Do they like us? Do we come off as intelligent? And so little do we think that, oh, the person that I'm talking to probably is feeling the same way as I am. So what I should do is make them feel that accepted and liked, and in turn that creates a positive feedback. They will do the same for me. So when I realized that in a social interaction, or in a new social interaction in university, and I felt uncomfortable, oh, I shouldn't talk to that group of people, they might not like me, I realized, no, they probably feel the same way. And once I realized that, I broke that barrier of interacting with people and being more comfortable in new social settings, and being a good listener, that really helps. And I think I was telling Omar earlier, I had a really great friend in undergrad who she was an amazing listener, and she would make friends with everyone everywhere. She was friends with the ladies that worked at Subway, with the custodian at Western. She would know what their kids and stop and talk to them. And when you talk to her, or when anyone talked to her, she made you feel like you were the only person in the room. And I really admired that. And she was someone, and that trait I really admired, and I tried to think about it and implement it in my life, and take it with me. And so that was one of those things. That's how my social interactions my sense of relationships developed. I moved here when I was in grade 5.
Grade 5, okay.
And so I was 10, and I didn't speak any English, 0. I went to an all-Arabic school when I was younger. And then I went to the Middle East, and I came back for university.
Okay. What did you take in university?
I did biochemistry.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And did a lot of research, a lot of biochem.
Yeah. Was your interest in that field, did it develop in your time in the Middle East in high school?
I think in high school I had the option between doing chemistry and biology, or chemistry and physics. In grade 11 and 12 we could only do 2. So I chose at the time, so I loved chemistry. Chemistry was my favorite subject in high school. And I decided at the time that I was going to do chemistry and biology, because I was considering a career in medicine or something in the medical field. I took a biology, my biology class. I remember my teacher showed us this really cool video. This may not sound cool to you guys, but it was so cool to me, of these blood cells, and it was a microscopic images of cells, and I was just so fascinated by it. And we talked a lot about stem cells and stem cells ethics, and I was also fascinated by the intersectionality between the social implications of medicine and research and the science itself. So that's how I followed. That's why I chose the biology and the chemistry route, rather than doing chem and physics, which would have turned me into an engineer. yeah, from there, I decided to do biochem in undergrad because I liked chemistry so much, and bio was just a nice addition to it.
Okay. And was it also in your time in university that your passion for the environment was discovered?
I think in university I was really interested in social equity.
Yeah.
Politics, Canadian policies, international policies. But it was actually in high school. In high school, I had another really wonderful friend. She was the one who really first exposed me to environmentalism. She was huge on recycling, and Oman didn't really have a recycling culture, and I didn't really grow up around one either. So she talked a lot about recycling and waste management, and it was very eye-opening, and it was through her that I was exposed to that. And her and I and another friend of ours started our little charity or a little organization when we were in high school. We called it GWAC. It was Global Warming Awareness for Children. And our main objective was to really stop global warming, or to make people do something about it. We had to focus all of our energy on children and like educating, the younger grades. Yeah. Although we were children ourselves, we didn't see it that way at the time. And so that's how I was first interested in climate change and environmentalism. It was a bit dormant in undergrad. A lot of my focus was on mentorship programs, equity, social equity, and community outreach. And then in undergrad, when I started my master's, that's when it really took shape.
Okay, and where did you take your master's?
So I started my first master's at McGill University.
Okay.
It was in biochemistry, where I did cancer research. And on the side, I got an email that had said, we're looking for volunteers, and we're doing this like UN simulation around climate change. I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. I love policy. I'm kind of interested in climate change. So I went and I started working with this amazing group of people. And we did, at the time, it was 2015. The Paris Agreement was signed that year in November. So the plan was to do the simulation right before the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement, or every year, all the world leaders meet together in a meeting called COP, and the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. And they meet and they go through agreements or climate change policies at an international level. So they were signing a new agreement, if you've heard of the Kyoto Agreement or the Bonn Agreement. So the Paris was a new agreement, and never before have all world leaders agreed on one set of policies. But in 2015, they did. They all agreed on like some groundbreaking policies, being that we need to halt the global warming temperatures below 2 degrees. We need to help developed countries need to finance developing countries. Developed countries committed $100 billion to developing countries. So there was a bunch of really important points that were signed on the Paris Agreement. But before the Paris Agreement, we were like, this Paris Agreement is going to happen. It's really inaccessible to the public because it's so politically technical. There's a lot of jargon around it. So we wanted to make it more accessible. And so doing this simulation helped people access what the huge meeting was going to be about. And when it happened, those who attended, and myself included, we were much more informed on what had happened. But what we also took away from it was that the solution to climate change isn't really big world leaders getting together and sitting around a table and agreeing on something, because it is so difficult for all of them to agree on something, and it is so difficult for them to take on these high-level points and put them into action. So the takeaway from it was that the real solution is local action. And so me and the group of friends that started, or they've become friends now, but at the time, me and the group of people that did the simulation in 2015 decided to do a series of other events, and together we created a charity that we officially got incorporated. I just heard back today, and we called it Climatable, or in French, Climatable. And our focus is to educate those who are already kind of interested in climate change but really don't know what to do, or they're not really well versed in policy, to educate them, and as well as to channel climate action opportunities at a local level, and to collaborate with other local organizations in Montreal. I think the issue is complicated and simple at the same time.
Yeah.
I would say, first I would give some information, being you're interested in climate change. Well, the World Organization, not World Organization, you're interested in climate change, world leaders have agreed to do something about it. That's number one. Canada has agreed to halt the investment, the global warming temperatures to under 2 degrees. That's huge. So that's number one. Number two, carbon emissions, greenhouse gases. That leads to climate change. What are the greatest causes of carbon emissions in your community? Identify them. See if there's research about it. In Montreal, for example, transportation takes the greatest section of emissions of greenhouse gases. So the idea is that we need to halt carbon emissions, halt the production of greenhouse gases, and that's how we could really stop global warming, in a very optimistic sense. But I would say focus at a local level. Yeah, we talked about international impacts of climate change. Yeah, we talked about climate migrants. Yeah, we talked about so many different aspects. Choose one specific aspect of it. Are you interested in mitigating it? Halting it? Are you interested in helping adapt to the changes that are going to happen? What are your interests? What are your skill sets? Are you an engineer? Are you a social worker? Are you or do you desire to be one? Because regardless of what your future professional goals, climate change will somehow impact you, or you will have an impact on it. Whether you want to be a physician, a businessman, sustainability is a very is a very large theme.
You were telling me earlier that Montreal has for them recycling is something that they value. It's almost like if you don't recycle there, then
at least with the people I hang out with.
Okay, and
so maybe a bit biased.
I guess you were also telling me about how when you come back to London, you don't really see the same level of advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like it's lacking compared to Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we were just hoping if you could elaborate a little bit about that and how you feel about that, and if there's any groups in London that you are aware of that we could support.
So going back to, I'll connect from the Paris Agreement's big simulation to local action. The idea is that the solution to climate change isn't going to be at a big government level. It's not going to be the presidents of X and Y countries deciding that, okay, they've all signed the Paris Agreement. It's the first time that every world leader has signed the Paris Agreement, except the U.S. that withdrew recently. But although they've signed it and they've all acknowledged that climate change is a problem, there's no actionable points for, or they're not taking action. We have world leaders are investing in pipelines, etc. So the solution is really at a local level, at a municipal level, at a city level. I see a lot of groups, and because I live and work in Montreal, I see a lot of groups that are trying to advocate that line of thinking, that in order for us to have any real change, we have to change the way our borough, our municipality, our city does things, and does things in a way that aligns with the Paris Agreement, or aligns with cutting down carbon emissions. For example, Vancouver is committed to cutting down their carbon emissions by 80% by 2050, I believe. Copenhagen by 100% by 2020. So there's a lot of cities around the world that have realized that the solution is the city itself at a city level. So when I come here to London, I find it very frustrating that there's no composting. That's one thing, for example. The recycling system is a bit difficult. There's you have to separate your recycling. But our transportation system isn't great. Last I remember people buy cars here because it takes too long to get anywhere with the bus. And houses are always being built. The city is expanding. And when I think about what are the greatest emitters of carbon emissions, it's transportation, it's residents, heating, etc. So I just hope, maybe because I am a London resident, I should be more proactive in my London community.
Yeah.
But something as simple as having compost in the city would be really nice. And then we move on to how do we make transportation more accessible and easier, and an alternative to owning a car. And that would really help.
Do you have any contacts or people that you know in this community where you'd be able to relay this information so that it's more conducive to the approach that you have going on in Montreal?
That's a good point. I unfortunately have been a bit out of touch in London. Mm-hmm. But me and my brother were talking the other day, and we're saying that we should really have some sort of campaign to encourage London to adopt certain more environmental practices, again, like compost. But there's many things that could be done in the city. But it takes just an average citizen, you don't need to be a politician, but you need to just have the passion to advocate and take the time to talk to people, to convince people, okay, let's do something about this. The government isn't going to do it on its own.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. That's all the time that we have for now. But tune in again next episode as we conclude our conversation in next week's installment of the show. If you or someone you know would like to be on the show, contact us through our social media channels. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Collective Journey. And always keep in mind, this is not just my adventure, but it's yours as well. This is our collective journey.